Well, we are into the 2021 season, and if you guys have joined me over the last several seasons, we always have at least one guest host one day of the week to join us and talk some ball, and not just talk about the things we're seeing, but how do those things come to life? How do you practice them? And I'm excited to be joined this season by Noel Mazzone. Noel, it's great to have you here. I'm excited to be able to talk ball with you weekly as we go through the 2021 season.
Oh, man, I'm excited, Keith. I'm glad you called me. I've been sitting around wondering what I was going to do. I have nobody to talk ball with this year.
Well, this is the perfect opportunity. And, you know, as far as the amount of games this week, not a lot. We're in week 0. Both of us have watched some high school games, obviously some of the NFL preseason games, but I think there's a lot to learn from every single week, even here in week 0. And, you know, one of the things that I saw kind of, this was a trend, you know, a couple years ago, we started to see outside zone start to get into everybody's playbook. And if you look at Illinois, you know, a new look Illinois with Brett Bielema there as the head coach, and obviously those guys are going to be focused on running the football, but the stretch play, the outside zone play was big for them. And then I saw it again hit for a nice gain with Chip Kelly and the UCLA Bruins. And it's a play, when you understand how to run it, it does become very tough to defend.
Yeah, I think, you know, the stretch play, ever since Alex Gibbs and Mike Shanahan and back in the Broncos days, but the stretch play is always probably one of the top. It used to be stretch and power, right, in the NFL. And I think there's been such a overload of tight zone read, inside zone, that you're always looking for ways to displace the defense. And I think now I agree with you. In fact, Johnny Marinelli, who's on the Illinois staff, I texted him right after the game and said, that's what they were running. They were just stretch, and then a little split zone. And then obviously with Chip down over at UCLA, which is cool about Chip. I happened to be with him, hang out with him last weekend out in Manhattan Beach. And, he was like, I don't know, we might be pretty good this year. And the cool thing about Chip is that he has, I can remember when he was at Oregon, and he was one of the leaders of the tempo offenses. Mm-hmm. And it was spread, tempo, Mariota, and all those guys, and throwing it and running a ton of zone read. And now I watched him the last couple of years, and even this year, and he's really got an unbelievable run game he's starting to develop. And stretch is obviously one of the mainstays. What I do think too, Keith, is that we're so much gun now. Is some same side runs. Mm-hmm. And I liked what Chip was doing with the same side tight zone stuff. Yeah,
I believe they did one of those. I mean, it looked like it went straight downhill, that the running back really didn't even come across on one of their short yardage touchdowns there later in the game. I wasn't able to roll that back and look at it, but he at least did not get his aim point all the way across the center. And you've seen quite a few teams do that. It's almost just like a straight dive play, right? You think back to the under center days and split backs and stuff like that, where you just turn and that guy comes right down the line.
Yeah, like a lot of it's a big NFL run. It's called duo, mm-hmm. where you're basically just doubling the down guys. It's old school classic Washington Redskins, Joe Gibbs tight zone, where you basically double the down guys to the second level and get you some good angles and get some movement. Yeah, I think I see a lot of teams running that these days.
Yeah, it's definitely a good play. I liked it when we get down on the goal line. We liked to use power quite a bit. But, when you get down to the goal line, those guys are just selling out to shoot those gaps hard. You think about it for the defense. There's not much room. They can't give up an inch. So they'll sell out and maybe penetrate too deep. And your pullers, that block back, all those kinds of things become a little bit more difficult. So when you can use something like the duo down there, I think it has a lot of potential just to be able to drive people off the ball. And I know, I'm thinking back to my BW days. We utilized that in a few different ways. I know we had it in a Wildcat package and used that successfully in a big game. And we even went to, we did power read quite a bit, but we experimented and went to like a duo read down on the goal line as well, and worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah, it gets a little tough going down there inside the 3, doesn't it, Keith?
Yeah, it does.
It does. I mean, like you said, they get in the old risky in the old Tom Cruise 62 monster down there, and there's not a lot of space. So I think you see more duo stuff. Obviously, some tight zone with the extra blocker on the backside, and then I saw a couple, and then everybody's going to throw the jet sweep on you down there, and just try to race you to the pylon.
Yeah, it's interesting, the jet sweep. I saw it used a few different ways this past weekend. I'm trying to think who was tossing. It might have been tossing that thing up in the air. I can't remember which team was doing it. Instead of the mesh. Illinois did it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, is that something you ever used? Just that little, toss that ball up in the air and let them run.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was a way. You're always looking for ways on tight zone plays to protect the back, to control the backside edge players, the 5 technique or the 9 technique or the backside backer. So when it's zone away, and I think it was actually the Nebraska-Illinois game where they tried to run stretch and the guy tracked it down from the backside for a loss. Mm-hmm. So bringing the motion and trying to hold or at least face freeze those backside players, the ends and the backside with the jet sweep. So they got to also protect for the jet sweep. Also helps you. It's just a form of naked, right?
Right.
Jet sweep is basically a form of naked when you run it away from your steam.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in speaking of the outside zone, that's what you start to see a lot of teams do along with it. I mean, it's a great complementary play. You're really getting movement from that defense, and a lot of times that quarterback, he has to run, especially if it's an under center team, right? You see that all the time in the NFL. You got to get out there to get the guy the ball, and then peel back and get back all the other way. But most of the time, they're running that play, and they probably actually don't get too far around where the original the ball was placed with the center, and they're throwing the football to somebody in space there. But it's been something, and we were talking before we got going. The Cleveland Browns here have really started to make a living off of doing that. And in watching 3 preseason games here, obviously my favorite NFL team, they were an offense that became just very efficient, and it didn't matter if it was our starters or somebody who's 4th down the line trying to make the team. That everybody did pretty well in this offense, and it's all built on starting with that outside zone play, and then a lot of the play action, including the nakeds off of it. And a stat came up yesterday when I was watching the game. In 2018, Baker had a really shaky year, and that year he was only designed out of the pocket 14 times, whereas last year Kevin Stefanski put him out of the pocket 80 times, and I think it's made a huge difference for him. He certainly is pretty good in the pocket as well. But when you think about designing things so they play to players' strengths, I think that's a strength for Baker.
Yeah, I think he does. They do. I love watching Cleveland's offense. And if you're talking about, the whole jet sweep and faking the jet sweep from under center or from gun, Matt Canada, who's now the coordinator of the Steelers, I mean, he was kind of the go-to guy in college when he was at NC State and Maryland on the old jet sweep. And then I tell you, if you want to watch them under the center bunch jet sweep, and they build their whole build a lot of passing game off it, is you watch Sean over at the Rams.
Oh yeah,
they do a great job with the jet sweep game. It's built in, so it's basically just for me it was always my quick motion out of the gun, the F quick or the fast and free motion with my F. But there's some people use it. It's just like an efficiency play or like calling a reverse. Hey, it's time to run our jet sweep. But I think like Matt and Sean and Cleveland and those guys, they do a good job of incorporating that jet sweep action and motion into the game plan. Yes. In other words, you build an offense off of that look.
Yeah, well, I think with all that, any kind of movement that you use, if you're doing it again and again, you're kind of training the defense. You think you're seeing something, especially something fast moving like the jet sweep that, you think the ball's going there. And you know this from having coached there in the NFL. I mean, if you can move a guy just a foot out of position, that's going to make a big difference in that play, right? You don't have to move them a ton, but you find, as you go down those levels, you start to really distort a defense, and it opens up those opportunities. What I like about the way the Rams do it is a lot of times you'll see them under center, and I think they just do a great job in being able to take it all the way outside. But then you'll see them too. The defense maybe is aligned or out there. The perimeter maybe has you out leverage where they hit it like in that outside zone alley, right? That play that you don't get outside the tight end, you stick your foot in the ground and get straight up field. They're able to do that too.
Well, and I learned this, when I was at the Jets years ago from Coach Mangini, is he used to call it meaningful motions and shifts. So if it's not meaningful, so like on offense, we're always looking to create numbers or create leverage on the defense. And so his big thing was, if you're going to shift or you're going to motion, all right, it's got to be meaningful. In other words, there's three things you're trying to do. You're either trying to give the quarterback some sort of a defensive indicator. Is it man? It's a zone. Are there any checks? Are they rocking the safeties? Whatever they're doing with your motion, so that helps him with what he needs to do. Or you're trying to out leverage or outnumber the defense. And so I think that's what those teams, Cleveland and Pittsburgh and LA and those type of guys, they do a great job of using the motions, the quick motions, the shifts to their advantage.
And I think when you take that concept down to the high school level, I remember a team we specifically, they were the best team in our conference, and our rival, and they always had a safety who was just a guy who could come up and play like a linebacker, right? And they would always play a free safety, and that guy was usually good at playing center field. And our strategy, when we figured it out how to do it to them, and it actually took multiple movements to be able to make them change responsibilities, but when we could get that strong safety, that guy who's better at run support, to have to play center field, and then that guy who really would rather not, get into the fray as much and stick his nose in there to have to come and support, we opened up some huge opportunities both in the run and then play action, especially with that guy who did like to come up and play. I mean, he was, you had any kind of run action, he's going. So at the high school level, I think it's not just, looking at, we're going to use this as window dressing or whatever. It's like you said, purposeful motion in order to affect the defense. Get some matchups that you like as well.
There you go. See how much you were ahead of the curve, Keith? You were doing it in high school.
Well, it was always something. Again, we did it exactly as you said. We found something within the structure of a defense that we could either out leverage them or get onto the people that we wanted to. And stretch was actually the outside zone was a big part of what we did at one of my stops. Was a head coach for 3 years there, and I think on the stretch play, our first guy who ran it over 2 years. He ended up being Ohio's leading rusher, but he averaged like 10.7 yards on the stretch play.
Wow. Well, the good thing about stretch is that it covers all your gaps. All right. It displaces the defense, and it creates. I mean, look at BYU last 2 years ago or whatever. He does a great job running the stretch play. It displaces the defense, and it creates running lanes. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different ways. What is your back reading, especially when you're in the gun? We used to have them read the three technique, because that ball can fit up inside because those gaps move, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden that thing's hitting up inside the guard or the tackle. So they have to cover every gap out there, and you can just get your guys on tracks and let them run instead of having to take maybe a high school 245, 50-pound offensive lineman and ask him to move a three technique vertical. It's a lot easier for him to move a guy horizontally down the line of scrimmage. Yeah,
definitely. And I think back to when we were running that stretch, we did run the inside zone play, and we learned it from a guy here who coached in Cleveland area for a long time, but he was also the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin at one point, Russ Jakes. And And, as far as the way we ran the inside zone is we would always run it to the first cover lineman past the center, and the shade didn't count. So we never ran it at the shade. Now, when I got to BW, we would run it more at the shade or the tight technique in order to kind of just get downhill on it a little bit more. But what I found it coupled well is that, you still had, if you were running it even at a 3 technique, there was a little bit of that lateral movement from the lineman. And if you were running stretch, that guy would still have the tendency, that defensive lineman, to displace himself a little bit in order to open up the run inside.
Right. Like I'm dating myself here, but back in the 80s, I used to go visit. I was only 6 years old. I used to go visit the Redskins at Carlisle, Pennsylvania, back when it was John Riggins and Joe Theismann and Joe Bugel and they had 3 plays. It was a tight zone, inside zone, outside zone, and OT counter. Mm-hmm. And they actually ran. It wasn't as much stretch as like when Alex Gibbs kind of got into it, started really stretching with Adrian James at the Colts, with Peyton and all those guys. But like the Redskins used to actually, it was always they stretch block it, but they would still track their back almost like it was tight zone and then bounce it. So that's kind of where I learned the basics of zone blocking back in the day, as they say.
Shifting the focus here, kind of taking some of these ideas that we've been talking about into a practice structure, and how do you get it done? So specifically, let's talk a little bit about the movement, the motions, shifts in motions, etc. We kind of got into this era of football for a little while with, all the spread, up-tempo offense that teams weren't moving as much. They were static. They get up to the ball quick. They get in their 2x2 or 3x1 and run a play as fast as they could. Well, we all know that our one-word calls and all those procedures that we were using on offense now have been adapted on defense. So those guys are getting pretty good to just being able to line up quickly and play whatever they want as well, not have to be vanilla. So I know I always get a lot of questions from coaches about, how can they put it into their offense and still, be up tempo, still do those kinds of things. What did you find were some of the best things you were able to do and able to incorporate some of those motions into your up tempo offense?
Yeah, so I had a tempo motion package, with the quick motions. I still create one-word plays that would have, So there's 3 type of motions, right? There's motions that are outside and come into the formation. There's motions that are outside and cross the formations, okay? And then there's motions that start outside and go into the formation and come back out. Mm-hmm. So those are the basic 3 things you've got, right? I never wanted to be tied back in the day where every position had their motion words. Right. Like the F had these words and the Z had these words and the Y had these. So we basically taught our receivers there was 3 motion names, and all we would do is tag who we wanted on those motions. Yeah. Could be the X, could be the split end, could be the F, could be the Y, could be the Z. Didn't matter. All right. Then the next set of motions you have are motions that start in the formation, so in the backfield. So those type of motions you either empty out of the formation, or you can motion out of the formation, or you can motion across the formation. So that was kind of the library or menu we had of motions. And then it's exactly like you said. Then as we broke down our opponent, we would one of the 2 things I would really look at, and that'd be the motion tape and the FIB, formations in the boundary tape. Okay, I wanted to see where my advantages came in those 2 things. And so then you start to develop your game plan off of, okay, these are the motions, right, that help me against the defense. But now when I put in the tempo motion plays, those were in every week, okay, because those never changed. That's just who we were. We're going to go dual right, F quick, Zulu comet. I mean, that was going to be a mainstay. Well, we're just going to give that a word, or we're going to go green, fast, Zulu comet, and that's Frisco. So the kids knew we had quick motion tempo plays where because I think anytime you tempo, the key is repetition. If you're going to run tempo plays, you need to rep those plays a ton. So your quarterback, he's going to in the line are going to get kind of messed up looks and different looks. So those are things that are worked on every week. And I guess the main thing is that I had my set of motion tempo plays that were in every week. So one day of camp, they got installed and we ran them every day, right? And then you would build your game plan motion plays.
So in looking at
that, I guess I didn't have...
Yeah, no, that answers it for sure. I mean, I'm 100% on board with what you said about not having all those names. I think, I used to love just getting old playbooks and studying terminology and trying to figure out how to simplify things, right? How to take, a formation structure that has like 75 words that you have to memorize to know how to play in it and really boil it down to a few things. And that's exactly what you're doing with those motions. Instead of having, 3 or 4 motions for every single guy, now it's just that motion that everybody can learn and their letter is tagged to it. But in looking at, your tempo plays, you installed them in camp. I still think, teams that are huddling right now should look at that opportunity. I saw, like in week 1 of the high school season, a team that did it pretty well. They huddled, but in certain situations they had those one-word plays and they were able to go and kind of caught the defense off guard and were able to convert those situations. But getting into using motions a little bit more, and then especially those tempo plays. You mentioned that you have to get a lot of reps for them. So do those reps only come in team? Do you like to walk those through? Do you do a team takeoff? I mean, what have been the best ways for you to make sure it's getting ready?
I think kids love repetition. I think they like routine. I really do. And so as I built my practice plan, all right, I'd always started the same. We were going to have a team takeoff period, all right, with the whole offense and kind of get things going. And that was always going to be the screens, all right? So there was always a couple screens that were in every game plan, the same screens, but whatever game plan screens would get worked on then. And that was just on error bags, running the end zone, bada bing, right? Then there are basics, right? There's the meat and potatoes of your offense that are attached. So to us, it was the receiver screens, the key screens. To us, it was the hitch, the slant, all right? And then it was our motion bubble screens, our comets and our quicks. So the things that are basically always, that are always showing up on your dinner table, all right? Those are the things that were built in our individual drills. So when we came into backfield, we were going to go backfield with the backs. Well, there was going to be, always tight zone stretch, and then maybe whatever game plan specific runs that were in that week. But there was always going to be our fast motion comets, our quick motion comets, et cetera, right? When we started with the receivers, we always started every practice, and we were going to throw the outside receiver screen, the inside receiver screens. We were going to throw a hitch and we were going to throw a slant. That was basically our pat and go. Okay. So in a snag. Mm-hmm. So that was built in. So if I wanted it to where if I didn't even show up to practice that day and I just told the guys to go start practice, they knew exactly what the drill was, exactly what would have been called, and exactly how to do it, where to line up on the field, how to move the ball in the hashes. I just want it the same every day, right? So we go, hey, we're pat and go. We know exactly what we're doing. Hey, we're backfield. We know exactly what we're doing, all right? So I always wanted constants. Then as I got into the individual periods, of course, always all your guys, your assistant coaches are always looking. They need more individual, all right? But you would get a little bit of time to work your little cone drills or whatever drills for your skilled players. But then as I got into individual, now I would break it down whole part. So, hey, quarterbacks, let's take the X and work on the game plan routes that he's going to have to run. All right. I mean, if the X is running no digs in your game plan for that week, then then don't go practice throwing digs to him that week. Mm-hmm. All right. Practice your main stuff, but then you got to start working on, hey, today is we're working all of his, his stop route, his back shoulder throws, whatever it is. Same thing with the F, the Y, and Z. So we would go individual, All right. So the quarterbacks would go with the X, go with the two inside receivers, go with the outside. Then we would go group. All right. Hey, we're working half side. All right. Now we're going individual. Now we're going half of the concept or whatever we're doing. And then we would go whole. Then we put the whole concept together and let all the quarterbacks throw. So that's kind of how I built all the practice plans.
Yeah, I love that method because it gives context to everything that you're doing, you know, and I like to be able to get out to practices. I watch some practice film on video as well from other guys, you know, that I have huddle access to. And what's interesting to me, though, I think sometimes coaches get caught up in, you hear a lot of guys talk about everyday drills and this idea that, you know, you got to go out and do the same things every day and that's going to build the fundamentals. But I think you miss out on, you know, the game is played in context. Always, right? You're never just out there doing things without understanding, you know, what is this skill a part of? What are we working it for? I mean, I think back to, you know, that high school team I mentioned that we were coaching the stretch play, that on those days, you know, we would focus one day early in the week on just running all of our zone plays, right? So on those days, we were working all our zone blocking. And it went to what was a drill for us? Well, it was looking at, for every position on this particular play, what are the scenarios my guy has to face, and drilling those things. And sometimes it might be more than another because of a certain defense you were facing, et cetera. So you could focus it even more. But I think, you know, for the purpose of, we got to keep building fundamentals, I'm going to do everyday drills, that sometimes we miss on that and don't get the context that the players need.
Well, you're exactly right. And so, are you just practicing plays? Are you practicing the game plan? All right. You know, and I think that what's really become so important now, especially if you're any kind of a tempo team, is your walk-through periods, you know, where most of the coaching gets done. So I wanted to be able to script the days. I actually script every day practice like it's a game. All right. So I actually, my scripts for practice, the call sheet for practice, the scripts look exactly like my call sheet that I use on Saturday night. So because for one thing, it makes me limit what I'm doing. All right, I'm putting in all this cool stuff and all these plays and all that. And, you know, the trouble is, how can you practice it all?
Right.
And so on I have my 15 openers. Here's my 3 or 4 third mediums. Here's my couple of red zone plays. So I always talk to my guys about, I want to play the game as much as I can Monday through Friday during practice. All right. Here we're going to work on the game plan install individually, so we can teach you what we want you to do on these game plan routes. All right. Here we're going to put you together as a group. Now we're going to go together as a team, and I want to move the ball as much as I can. So I want to play as many drives as I can during the week in practice.
I know we talked about this before on a previous podcast, but you mentioned, scripting practice. Now, I believe you talked to me one time about not actually having all the calls scripted, though, having the situation scripted and then being able to make those calls in practice. Is that something you would do all the time, or just some of the time?
I would always at some point have a team period where it was where the only thing that the scout team and the scout team guy running the scout team had was hash, field position, and down and distance. And then his job was to try to be the defensive coordinator that I was playing that week. And so he would know by down and distance and the hash what the calls were. Now, yeah, obviously you're going to miss on some of the exotic blitzes, so I didn't worry about that. It was just kind of normal down and distance. But I always wanted to have one team period of drives, 4 to 6 play drives, where we were just playing football. Mm-hmm. We rolled the ball out. I'm calling plays off my call sheet. Defensive coordinator, you're calling defenses. And I didn't do any third down in that period. And I'd usually, a lot of times, always end every drive with some sort of a red zone play. I mean, you win your game situationally, right? Right. Third down and red zone. All right. Anybody can call plays on first and second down. Those are easy, right? So I didn't think. I always thought it was kind of stupid that I used to have a third down period for 10 minutes on Tuesday, and that was it. All right. I didn't even work on it on Monday or Wednesday. or this is red zone day. We're just working red zone. So I try to get some third down and red zone calls in every practice. So I will install. Now, it may not be the whole game plan for red zone. I may be heavy on red zone on Wednesday and heavy on third down on Tuesday, but both of those days, all 3 days, they're going to get, hey, this is 3rd and 4. Here's my first call. Oh, hey, we just broke. We're at the plus 10. Here's my first call. That's going to happen on a Monday.
I like that idea of having at least some of those periods throughout the week. And, as you were talking about it, what it really brings to mind is that, especially early season, as every team's new, right? You need to learn what they can do. But younger guys too, guys who are coordinators for the first time, you get your reps in practice as a coach, right? The more you call plays, the more you get used to calling plays and being in certain situations, and it becomes automatic. Yeah, you always have that call sheet, but I think you've probably hit that where you don't even need to look down at it, that this is the play in this situation.
Yeah, because I've been calling them off that sheet all week, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not what I know; it's what the kids know. So as we at the end of practice or the next day in the meetings at the quarterbacks, they would be, it would get, hey, coach, that third down play sucks, right? All right, let's throw it out. All right, and then so the call sheet grew as your game plan. And what it really did, Keith, it kept me in check for as not having too much volume. I'm not a volume guy.
Right.
All right. So it kept me in check because I knew this is how many blank spaces I had on my call sheet. So build your call sheet to what you're comfortable with being able to handle, not only in practice but as a play caller. Is it 60 plays? Is it 40 plays? Is it 25 plays? Is it 100? I don't know. Everybody's different, right? But build that call sheet, and as you script during the week, build your call sheet starting on Sunday and Monday. Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, here's my openers. Here's my base runs. Here's my play action off the base runs, and put them in your slots, and you'll build your call sheet. And then I'm looking at that call sheet all week, so I'm very familiar with it.
Well, Coach, that was some great stuff this week, prompted by just a few games. So I'm excited to come back next week after a full weekend of games here. Some big ones kicking off on Thursday, and I'm sure we'll have some great conversation.
So, Keith, you're telling me my work for this job is that I have to sit on the couch and eat chips and drink beer all weekend and watch games?
That's it.
That's how I prepare for this job?
Yeah, that's what we do.
That's my assignment?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a bad gig, Noel.
Not a bad gig if you can get it, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I look forward to doing this again next week.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Check out the links in the show notes to some of Noel's stuff that he has on CoachTube. Tune into all of our in-season shows, starting with Adjustments on Monday. We have Noel on Wednesday. We'll have a couple quick casts in the middle of the week, and we'll tie things up on Friday with some things that can help you through the weekend. Follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com.